on Zoom. I did 10 high school interviews this week for mock interviews on Zoom and 2 school board meetings, so I'm done.
So we're missing Amber, and is Eamon staying on the meeting?
He's got a class, he's got and some things he's got to deal with, and I think he will be back, is the way I understood it.
Okay, so we are now live, and we are also streaming to YouTube.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, if your camera is off, it looks like you're not in the meeting. So there we go. So.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. All right, we will start. I assume any members who are not here yet will be joining us. I did not hear from anybody that they were not coming. And the first thing I need to do is make an amendment to the agenda before we approve it, because I left something off in my hurry to get it done. And that was just approval of the minutes.
Hey, Pat, should we take a roll call first? Don't we usually take a roll call?
Okay, sure. All right.
I'll do it for you.
Thank you, Doug.
All righty. Egan Cran.
Here.
Larry Nadler.
Here.
Hannah Story. Hannah, are you muted?
I'm here.
Okay, very good. Deidre DeLong. Okay, and Pat Mead.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug.
Uh-huh.
Sorry. I will learn about parliamentary procedure someday. I'll even read a book on it, maybe.
That's okay. It's okay. We're here to help.
We'll call the meeting to order. Before we approve the agenda, I need to add something to it, and that is the approval of the minutes from our September 17th meeting, and then public participation for items not on the agenda. And then we'll allow public participation for the items on the agenda. We get to them much like they do in city council. So can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Larry. In a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Wait,
Egon.
I have a question. Are we
Yes.
including public participation? If not, can I make a motion to put that on the agenda? Sorry, I missed it.
I thought I said that. I thought I said after the minutes, we'll do public participation for items not on the agenda. And then like city council does when an agenda item comes up, we'll let people chime in then. Okay.
You need to vote on the amendment. then.
Yes, we have a first and a second. We need to take a vote. Are you going to run that for us, Doug, again?
Sure, I will.
Okay.
Egan Cran,
Yes.
Larry Nadler,
Yes.
Hannah Story,
Yes.
Deidre DeLong, Pat Mead.
Yes. And Deirdre, you'll need to unmute when you vote,
I read your lips.
but we can read your lips, but we might have some non-lip readers out there.
An easy way to unmute, if you want, is hold your space bar down when you're ready to talk.
Unless you're on a phone. Okay. And then we need a motion to approve the minutes from September 17th that Amy Gabbard had sent to everybody.
So
Can I
moved.
get thank you, Larry. In a second.
Second.
Thank you, Egon. And then we'll call the roll to approve the minutes.
Egon Cran,
Yes.
Larry Nadler,
Yes.
Hannah Story. Hannah, you're muted. Hit your.
Yes.
Okay. Deirdre DeLong,
Yes.
Pat Mead.
Yes. All right. And what we'll do is have public participation now for items not on the agenda. The agenda will include, so you don't need to talk about these items quite yet, include the city's response to the PCRRC's recommendation for a task force, a police survey that Doug Elliott has sent to everyone, the actual ordinance that we operate under, and the Know Your Rights pamphlet that we've been working on with the OPD. So if somebody has something they want to talk about besides those 4 items, they're welcome to raise their hand, and Jessica will maneuver things for us so that you can speak to the commission.
Mr. Mead, I do not see any raised hands at this time.
Okay, but we do have people in attendance. I see.
We have about 9.
Okay, all right. Then the first item on the agenda, which the public is welcome to give comment on now, and then we, the commission, will discuss it, is an update on the city's response to the PCRRC's recommendation to the task force to research alternatives to traditional policing. And I think we should start there by having an explanation of what action City Council took Tuesday night.
I have prepared just a slight overview of what occurred, and then I can share then our interpretation of what our next steps would be. Would that be okay?
That would be good, because I was at a Butler Tech School Board meeting. I did watch City Council yesterday during the 3.5 hours of free time I had, and saw the discussion. But if you summarize their kind of what they've done, so we know where to move forward.
Yeah, so just a little bit of history. Black Lives Matter PCRRC sent forward to council the recommendation that they adopt the task force as presented by Black Lives Matter. And then City Council discussed it. And then Councilman Prithers came back with a resolution that had a slightly modified approach, but still adopted the intention of the task force. And so that did pass on Tuesday night, his resolution at a vote of 4-3. And I'd like to share my screen with you briefly to show kind of the next steps that I think we can take. So give me just a minute here.
Okay, and I know the commission members, I hope that I sent you a copy of it and you received it. And I think it's section 1 that really applies to us as a commission.
Yes, and so
directly.
yes.
Okay. Now, if you could enlarge that, Jessica, your screen, can you enlarge it for us old folks that have a little trouble seeing?
How's that? Can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So this is just a review of the Black Lives Matter proposal number 3 and the PCRRC recommendation of that, and then the council vote on what was named the Safe and Equitable Society Resolution. And so what I've done is I've taken the Black Lives Matter third proposal and I outlined the topics that they would be reviewed by the task force. And that was racial discrimination, mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, poverty, interpersonal violence, and international immigrant experience. And then on the right here, you can see where I think the proposed data source can be. And I will say this is Jessica Green speaking, and these are things that will need to be explored. But it's either going to be to be determined, or the Coalition for a Healthy Community has received a large grant that is to be doing a resources needs assessment, which is really kind of awesome alignment. And so I've listed there where I think their needs assessment can help us. And then our recent housing study, the census, and then a few things need to be determined as well. Then I list here the Black Lives Matter recommended review strategies, which is a research and literature review. So researching of other cities in regard to police strategies, and also a literature review and alternatives to policing. And then they list a resource needs assessment, which includes which services exist in Oxford, which services offer social workers, to identify gaps that exist and what resources may be needed to close that gap, and then how do these services work with the police department. And then they really had a section there on seeking community input as well through town halls, community forums, to gather feedback on the topics above, and to identify gaps and needs for the future. So our current plan of action after the passage of the resolution would be that PCRRC will lead the research of other cities in regard to policing strategies, and possibly the literature review to alternative to policing. So council is sending back to your commission the items that are like really specifically police oriented. And then staff and consultants will lead as part of the community strategic plan. So this is also in alignment with City Council has decided to proceed with an updated comprehensive plan. We made a presentation that we'd like to call it the community strategic plan. And we're proposing that we will create a safety, health, and equity chapter. In order to create that chapter, we will do the resource needs assessment in partnership with the Coalition for a Healthy Community And we may need to expand that to identify those areas above. And then we'll also work to get broad community input and their feedback. And then the next step would then be to work to create this chapter, which will outline our current situation, identify future goals, and then a timeline to achieve them. So that'll all be done with a massive amount of public input. I don't want you to think that that's not going to happen, but there's going to be a huge amount of public outreach and public input on the creation of this chapter and the identification of goals that we're going to be working toward. So our next steps would be for your PCRRC to determine how to conduct the police specific part of their recommendation, which is the research and the literature review, or excuse me, the research and the literature review, and perhaps to establish a timeline for yourselves. And then for our staff, we are digesting like really what our next steps are for both the broad community comp plan, strategic plan, and the development of this chapter. And in my opinion, the amount of public input that's already occurred is going to drive that this is a chapter that needs to be created first. It's one of the first things. And that will be, we're going to meet with the Coalition for a Healthy Community to better understand the scope of their upcoming resource needs assessment, to determine how to gather the assessment of the missing items recommended by Black Lives Matter that were on that chart I had above, and then to establish a timeline and strategy to then conduct that resource needs assessment and to get our community input sessions. So that is my summary. And I will say this is my first interpretation. This is going to mature and matriculate as staff really digest what our next steps are and how we're going to engage the public, but this is our initial thinking. And I'll stop there. And I have a couple of raised hands. Do you care if I turn off my screen share, or do you want to see it? And Pat, you're muted.
The screen share, I don't know, that might help the people who are making comments, possibly, but whatever you feel like doing is okay with me. What I want to ask first is we'll get some public participation. Then I want to hear from other people who were at the city council meeting. I know, maybe Doug's interpretation, or I don't know if any members of the commission zoomed into the city council meeting and saw it to kind of see if they interpreted it the same way. I don't know who else has been there. But yeah, let's let the public comment first, and then we can have a discussion after we get input from anybody who has their hands raised. So go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, first we have Ms. Rosenberg. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shauna Rosenberg, and I live at 1036 Arrowhead Drive. My comments on this agenda item are pretty off the cuff. So I will let you know, as most of you know, I'm a member of Black Lives Matter Oxford. So this kind of represents our thinking about this situation as well as my own thinking. So a few things are, I really appreciate all the thought that Jessica has put into this. I really love her skills at project management. This is just wonderful. I think that she's done a great job of interpreting what we saw in Dave's, Mr. Prithridge's resolution. But a few of the things, just a quick mention that the Family and Social Work Department already has a lit review started to investigate these items. So just know that that's a resource that's out there. That's a great Miami partnership that you guys can have when going through with this. Another thing that I'd just like to say is, there's a lot of talk at City Council about how, Councilor Prithridge's resolution is not mutually exclusive with having the kind of independent task force that we had suggested originally and that you guys then passed on to City Council. I think that it would be great still for, I know that there's a lot of plans for community input. I do feel like I would rather see diverse voices at the table rather than necessarily being in focus groups or whatever. But you know, I think that there is still a lot of great work that can be done, even if it is not exactly what we proposed to you guys or what you proposed. I guess what I would just like to say is that you've now been given some of this work back, and you have a lot of freedom, I think, to come up with the ways that you would then proceed. And so, you know, I really appreciate that Jessica has said, you know, this is her first draft on this, and, you know, she's willing to make changes. You know, I'm sure that she's willing to make the changes based on what you guys say as input and on what city council also says as input. So I don't feel like, you know, as a member of Black Lives Matter that had a very specific thing in mind, I don't feel like this is the end of the road for what we want to see happen, because I do think that there's just so much flexibility currently. So just to sum up, I do wish that this were an independent task force instead of city-led. I wish that there were, you know, a lot of different voices at the table, but I do really appreciate that there will be subject matter experts like the Coalition for a Healthy Community, and, you know, OPD. So I appreciate that. I would just like to see that the intention of having inclusivity kept in mind was actually in the formation of the project in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna.
All right, next we have Mr. Bracken. Go ahead.
Sorry, did you get any of that? My mute went off and on.
We're
So,
start over, please.
City council member, many of you know me. I was just hoping for some clarification because that looked great, Jessica, but it also seemed to be more inclusive than I thought the original proposal was. So that sort of matched what I got from Councilor Pritchard's sort of comp plan. But in terms of the proposal that like was originally coming from PCRC, I felt like that was about policing and alternative policing specifically, rather than front end solutions. So for example, it looked like your research was about how to address homelessness in general, whereas I took the original proposal to mean how are police interactions with homelessness, right? Does that make sense? I'm trying to make a distinction whether we're trying to solve these big giant social issues, which are great and I think we should solve, but in terms of the PCRC, are we not addressing these specific issues in terms of policing and alternatives policing? So if I could just get some clarification on what PCRC meant and sort of maybe what was intended from the original proposal. Thanks.
Well, Mr. Bracken, I believe that the scope and scale of what we will be tackling on that needs and resources assessment actually might be broader than just policing, but how each of these things interacts with police will be a part of that new chapter that we're developing, I think is my interpretation. But again, these things, we're just beginning to kind of go down the road of this work, and it's been a few days, and I imagine it'll mature and change as we go through that process. And that's where that community input and feedback and all that will be a part of that discussion and scope as well. Did that help?
Yeah, it just brought up more questions, which we probably don't have time for right now. So we'll move on. And I
probably may not know yet, right? We're just beginning this task. So some of these will be developed as we go through the process.
Sure, it just seems that it's so big that that's the question that shouldn't be for PCRC, only the aspect around policing and alternatives policing, but this is your call, not mine. Just seems broader immediately than I would have guessed.
Thank you, Jason. I don't see any more hands, Jessica, do you?
I do not, but sometimes people are a little, let's see, because sometimes they'll wait until the last speaker.
Right.
If you want to speak on this topic, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to move on, I guess. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you for that, the work you've done. I don't know if anybody else on the commission, was anybody at City Council? Wave a hand. Anybody on the commission see it? I know Chief Jones was there and Doug was there, but no commission members. Did anybody watch the YouTube? Hannah watched it. There's rather lengthy discussion on this issue at City Council. But what they've given us back is what they passed was a resolution that has 2 sections. And Jessica and Chief and Doug can jump in and correct me if I'm reading it wrong. But it seems section 1 has to do with the PCRRC, and section 2 is a broader thing that has to do with the city, and much of what Jessica had on her 2 sheets tonight of work by the rest of the city and the staff, and working with the the Healthy Coalition, et cetera. But the first section was, in a sense, in my opinion, what City Council was asking us to work with OPD. And that was just better supporting and helping OPD in responding to social, behavioral, and behavioral health challenges in the community, which include looking at training, looking at operations, looking at enhancing collaboration with other social services, looking at possibly bringing in a city social worker to supplement, Deirdre's word last time is augment some of the work of the police department, to see if maybe they need a different kind of help in dealing with some of the things that they have to deal with. And I think that's what they gave us back. And then the broader issues, they sort of kept to themselves in the section 2 of the resolution they passed, which they want to wrap into their strategic plan, which addresses non-policing parts of homelessness and drug addiction and poverty and things that many times police deal with. Now, Doug, and I don't know if that's what you got out of it, or Chief, if that's what you got out of it.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Doug had to leave for a
Okay.
issue at home. So, yeah, I think Pat, kind of the way you put it, that's what I got out of it. So I apologize to Jessica because she had sent me this, but I have not had time today to get to it. And we got busy at the end of the day. And so I think I understand what Councilor Bracken is saying a little bit, but we just need time to digest it. But I kind of feel like the first part, the section 1, sends some issues back to PCRC, and that, in my mind, that is looking at what we are currently doing and how we can improve. And there's some things I could share with you about how we've tried internally to respond to the community and some of the Black Lives Matter proposals by having a community resource officer and trying to build our collaborations with social agencies. So I think those type of things are things that I'm going to bring to you and, get your input on. So whether that includes the literature review to alternatives to policing, as far as you guys guiding that, or whether that's part of the bigger, broader section 2, that's, I'm not sure.
Right.
But yeah, this is our first digesting of it, and we got it Tuesday night. Like, as you said, it was a lengthy discussion, and we've been busy with some other pressing matters going on. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment or ask questions or talk about where we are, Larry.
Yeah, I will watch the meeting. I have not. And what I'm curious about is you said it was a 4-3 vote. So I don't know if it would be possible in 30 to 60 seconds to maybe just briefly help me understand what any concerns are that by being aware of might help us as we move forward.
Yes, I think basically the division in council was not that. I would say all 7 of them were in favor of the basic concept of let's look at how we can augment the work of the police department, how we can deal with other issues in other ways or help the OPD. The issue was, I think 3 people wanted to just take our recommendation as was and form a task force.
Okay.
And so those 3 people voted against David's resolution, which kind of parsed out part of it that we can deal with right away with OPD and separated it from what he considered a more comprehensive look that the city needed to do about issues in the city, that he kind of separated them out And to me, the resolution charges us and OPD to look at what's going on now with certain issues. What's the OPD doing? How can we help them in improving training, personnel, whatever? And then it's up to us to, I think, how we approach that. Like, how do we do a literature review? Do we have a meeting where we call in people and let the Family and Social Work Department come and speak, or come back with information about things going on in other cities? I think that's up to us how to move forward on it. But that's how I understand their division. It was just form a whole new task force or take David's resolution and kind of parse out part of it to deal with right away with the OPD.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
So I think Hannah, I don't know if Hannah saw the same thing. Okay, anybody have anything else? Any questions or
I'll speak up. My internet is cutting in and out, so I apologize in advance. But Pat's summary of what happened is understanding of how City Council was divided on this issue. But my questions are, what does this mean for PCRC moving forward? If this is something that we are tasked with this research of other cities and police strategies and a literature review of alternatives to policing. And if we are, I would love to be able to rely on the voices of the bodies that are working to put all of this together. But my question is, do we need other meetings? And I know that we only meet quarterly. So I would love to see us, number one, have a good understanding of what this means for us to outline tasks and assign some responsibilities. So that's kind of my immediate gut reaction to this is, I don't think we can wait till February to figure this out. So that's my bar commission.
Yeah. According to the ordinance, we have to meet quarterly. It doesn't prevent us from meeting more often. So if we need to. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Because we got to start thinking, okay, where do we go from here now that we've been given this? And I know the OPD is already kind of working on some of these things. So I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, I'd like to share a few thoughts. One of the things I want to start off by saying is how grateful I am to be part of such a caring and responsive community. This conversation started in the summer after a very stressful time in a pandemic. And I think everyone's been working overtime to rise up and to meet the moment. And I feel good and positive about where we are at this point. I think whenever we're doing such difficult tasks, it's always going to be maybe too slow for some people and too fast for other people. But we're moving forward nonetheless. And so I do just want to share my gratitude with everyone who brought the proposal forward. I even took some time to look at the counter proposal that was presented by some members of the community in response to the Black Lives Matter Oxford proposal. And as you had said, Pat, in the previous meeting, there are just a lot of shared values. Even if the framing might have been slightly different, there are a lot of shared values there. And so I do, as we get closer to Thanksgiving, just want to share a moment of gratitude for the community that I live in right now. And to thank you for Councillor Prithrick for putting this together. I know it wasn't easy. I see a lot of latitude here. I see a lot of opportunity. I do feel like I want to say that I think we should lean into our situation as a town and gown community. We have a lot of expertise here. Many people have already started working on this. I teach an evidence-based practice class for graduate students, second-year graduate students in speech pathology and audiology. And in that class, I arrange my students in teams of 5, and they spend hours every week working in this team to do an exhaustive literature review of a single clinical question. And that's what they're there for. They're grad students, that's their job. I don't see that being something that we as a task force should necessarily do when we already have people as part of the university in family science and social work who have already started doing this and who are skilled at doing this, and they have the numbers to do this. So in the latitude that I see here, I'm just wondering, I think it's possible for us to create the task force, not to recreate the work that's doing in the Health Partnership for a Healthy Community, but to work in tandem with them and to find out what they're doing, and then how we can fill in the gaps, specifically as it relates to policing within the community, around all of the issues that have come up, right? So we're talking about homelessness, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about racial justice, but as it relates to policing. And so that's where I stand on that. And I'd like to hear some more conversation, but I'm also going to put a motion forward soon.
Anybody else want to chime in and think where do you feel we should be going next with this? What steps do you think we ought to take to work with OPD in these areas?
Well, on the issue of the literature review, I would echo what has been said, that there's expertise, there's an offer to be involved, and I think we absolutely should take advantage of that when it comes to that particular part of it. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. So,
And can I add something?
Yes.
I think one of the nice things about sort of being a part of a body of people to have these discussions, I know everyone's not on the same page, but I think that hearing all the voices is part of the robust conversation. I respect everybody on this PCRC. I count you as friends. And so, I really hope, even if people have some views that might run counter to it, I think it's worth hearing them.
Mr. Mead, can I speak?
yes.
Yeah, so I appreciate Amber's willingness to say, if you disagree with me, speak up. And so I'm not disagreeing with her. I met with the head of the family and social work department. And so we had a conversation about this. And I think it's an important piece. I guess it's just that everything is kind of focused on family science and social work or the Department of Psychology. And those groups have already kind of voiced their opinion in support of Black Lives Matter's proposal. And so it just, I feel like there's already kind of a leaning one way. And so, if we're talking about policing in general, what experts in policing are going to do this? Where are we going to get that viewpoint to, where we talk about crime and how to respond to crime?
Right.
And so I'm not opposing that. I'm just saying I want plenty of that. And I don't know what group that is. Is it a criminal justice department? Certainly, I know I have a just being a staff member, I get a voice, and so I have more input, than some. But we're extremely busy at OPD right now, and I'm not going to have a ton of time. So whereas graduate students are looking at it from their view, I feel like I've already heard all of their views, right? They call in to the meetings, they kind of speak about certain ways. So that's all I'm saying is I think we just got to be, I don't want to duplicate work and I don't want to duplicate effort, but at the same time, I do want to get a variety of viewpoints that are presented, because it's living in a university town, there's a lot of theory and there's a lot of great ideas, but then in practicality, I see that lacking in a lot of ways. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think obviously one of the things that was mentioned was looking at what other city police departments are doing. And so the way I look at it, we're looking at what other city police departments are doing. That is, in a sense, getting some input from policing. And I think that's an important part of it. What else is going on out there in medium-sized cities or small cities that's working with police departments? And why is it working? And is that something that would fit here? And so by looking at other police departments, as well as by getting input from, people in the psychology department or family and social work department, or the criminology department, they certainly have students that probably need research to do, and as well as local input from citizens locally here that just have, maybe no theoretical background, but are rooted in Oxford, and they have that practical, I've lived in this town 40 years, here's what I see, here's my experience, that we can get all those different input from all those different areas. So I agree with what Amber said and what John said, but there is a way, I think, of getting police input without burdening you, John, to be on another committee that's going to put in hours and hours and hours of work when you already have a job that we kind of want you to be doing. We don't want you to have to spend all that time doing literature research, but it can be done. And certainly there's ways to get input from that viewpoint.
I look at this like it's going to be collaborative. So if we're not seeing that certain voices are being contributed to this lit review and these reports, I think that this is going to be an ongoing conversation. And then perhaps we can have some formal meeting, perhaps by June, where we can be able to say to City Council, here's what we've combined and put together over the last several meetings with all of these voices. So I just want to emphasize that this is a process, and we haven't yet reached outcomes. So this is not a one and done in one meeting.
I would agree. Okay, anyone else want to speak up? Either a commission member or one of the staff members here might have some input.
I think my only feedback would be that Ms. Franklin, when you had said like maybe you are the task force, and if you're seeking public comment and things like that, like I would try to coordinate as carefully as we can. So because if we're going to go out and do like these big public meetings, we don't want to then have like then another public meeting, you know what I mean? We just want to be careful with our messaging, that it's clear and understandable to the public. And same with our nonprofits. I would hope that we can coordinate our approach with them so they're not being asked by one group and then asked by another group and then asked by another, you know what I mean? Like, so they're not getting exhausted with being asked similar type questions. So if we could just coordinate efforts or approach, we've had this for 2 days to really think through what does this mean. Right. So we can spend a little bit of time on what does the approach look like, and absolutely we would want to work with you on what that approach is. So I haven't even talked to the coalition formally yet. It's just been like literally short conversation. So we have a lot of work to do in the planning phase before we move forward into the implementation of data gathering and research.
Thank you. And in the spirit of what I tell my students, to be honest about our feelings, I'm nervous. Like there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of things that I think most of us on this task force, on this commission, when we decided to say yes to being on this commission, didn't imagine how crucial a role we would play in this little community, and Chief Jones. So, but I think, again, I think we can meet the moment and learn as we go.
Egon, Deidre, what do you think? You want to add anything in about how you think we ought to move forward with this?
I have nothing
I
to
just
add.
want to say go ahead.
Go ahead, Deidre.
I have nothing to add. I think it's been well said. Thank you.
Okay. Egon, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just, I'm willing and able to help wherever I can. So that's all I want to say.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now Amber, you mentioned you might have a motion to make, so it sounded
Well-
like you're prepared to push us forward, which I appreciate.
I am. I'm kind of trying to figure out a little wordsmithing here, but I think I'm getting close. So I'd like to make a motion that the PCRC go forward with forming an independent task force with the appropriate experts and stakeholders to address section 1 of the resolution. And I don't know what the resolution number is right now, but I guess it will have a number.
Are you talking about the resolution that council
Yes.
adopted last night?
Yes.
I should have that number, but I don't have it in front of me. Do you have it?
I have it. It's resolution 7235.
7235.
I figure rather than reiterating the language that's already in there, I'll just reference it. Section 1 of resolution 7235.
Okay.
Yes, would it be possible to put that back up on the screen just for a moment?
Do you want the resolution on the screen or my outline of thoughts?
That's a very good question, and I just
Need the resolution on the screen.
Okay.
I mean, if they're making a motion referring to a resolution, they need to know what they're referring
Right.
to.
Give me just a moment, please.
Yeah, and I did send it to everybody. I don't know if you had a chance to.
Yeah, I've got it
print
here.
out. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
section 1, section 1, there is a part that deals with specifically the PCRRC and the OPD. And you can see that it is asking us to collaboratively explore specific questions. All right, so it's asking us to work with OPD on this. And it's limited out some things. So basically, it puts us to how the OPD is responding to these different things in the community and how we can work with OPD on, not that they need our help much on most of this stuff. They know more about training than we do, but ideas and stuff about training and operational procedures and coordination with social services, et cetera. And then the possibility of hiring a social worker, which I did get, and I don't know if anybody else got email about not referring to it as a police social worker for some reason. And I could look that email up. It was actually something that the social workers organization, I don't know if they like that term, but anyway, it calls for us to look into that with the OPD to see if there's other ways to help address some of the issues that right now we're asking the police department to address alone.
So I don't see this, and I'd like to hear from other people and Chief Jones as well, as it's just us and them in a room, Chief Jones. I mean, like you said, you've got a lot on your plate right now, but that together we can work to identify the appropriate experts, stakeholders that could be part of this task force, and that, it would be complementary to section 2, which is the broader scope, I think, that Jessica was talking about and that we discussed earlier.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Amber. I feel that if you look at section 1 and what it's specific for, I mean, this is what you guys do right now, is you work with us on guiding us and giving us recommendations, and you advise us. So I guess that's where, before before we go down that path, I think Jessica's interpretation, we really need to look at that closer, because it doesn't say anything about a literature review. I don't know. I feel like that's section 2. Because those issues transcend traditional policing. So I kind of feel like that motion, just in my opinion, is basically, city council voted one way, but we're going to form our own task force and do it anyway. And I think there'll be a lot of duplication to section 2. But again, like, I understand you guys are volunteers and I'm busy as well. So, maybe you only need a few of you on this task force, and then, I assign a couple people from OPD, and then we bring in folks from the social work community. I had a meeting, like I said, I feel like we are trying to respond to Black Lives Matter proposals right now with the limited ability that we can. you know Obviously their proposal was much bigger as far as transcending it, and it would require council action to in the budget. But like with what we are doing with our community resource officer, I would like for you to hear more about that, and then bring in the social worker who's been riding with the police officer, and then talk to Randy Allman from Butler Behavioral Health, who had a meeting with Lieutenant Finning and I, and started talking about, models that I wasn't familiar with, and how it probably wouldn't be this police social worker. It would be somebody they supervise, who would then work, they would be supervised by people who know how to supervise social workers or mental health professionals, and not supervised by the police, but they would collaborate with the police, maybe come on ride-alongs and do things like that. So I guess, if you're trying to narrow down who sits on it, I understand. But if we're going to make a larger, wide community task force, I think then it's going to get, typically you can kill something by sending it to a committee. So that's what I worry about. So, and we're trying to make progress. We're trying to move forward. But, that's up to you guys.
If I may, I'd also like to chime in. Part of me is thinking we may need a steering committee or a group to help on the creation of this chapter that will deal with, public safety and community wellness. I guess I'm going to ask for a little bit more time to meet with the Coalition for Healthy Community, to understand the scope of what they're doing, to even talk with their consultants about these gaps that are still there. And because one of my ideas is that while we were doing this broad research about these things in our community, we would, as through that research, tie it back to how it impacts our policing as well. Like that would just be one of those bullet points. Like, this is the broad issue in our community, but then this is how it deals with policing. But that's going to take, even if you just give me like, I don't know, a few weeks to like explore that option, it feels maybe a little, I don't know. I don't want to create something that's contradictory when we could be doing something collaboratively. I just don't know enough yet, I guess would be my feedback.
Yeah, okay. And I think we can stay away from words like task force and call it a working group. And then we won't be recreating something somebody did not ask us to create. I don't like the word committee either. But I'm thinking of what Amber has said, and it seems like create a working group to start exploring the different things out there, to hear from people who in other cities are running programs that deal in the areas that we've been asked to look at, to hear from experts who do research in the area in social work, criminology, psychology, to hear from people in the community, and just gather information. And it would not be the whole PCRRC, a couple members with some community people to help and guide us. But I don't want to step on Jessica's toes if we need a little time, because she's right. This happened 2 nights ago that we were given this back. However, the idea for the research has been percolating from when Black Lives Matter first brought this up. And we're still wrestling with how to, achieve what we want to achieve, and looking at different ways to alternatives to policing and or augmenting the police department, collaborating, finding partners to collaborate with them, however you want to phrase it. So I don't want that to take forever. I hate to tell people, well, we need 6 more weeks before we can start really gathering the information to deal with issues in Oxford. But we may need a little while. Like Jessica, it was 2 nights ago. I watched the whole meeting yesterday and still trying to process the hour-and-a-half conversation that City Council had, and jive it with the Black Lives Matter proposal, and then section 1 of this, without stepping on the toes of section 2 of this, because they seem to run into each other in my mind. I don't know if anybody else on the commission has any thoughts. And Amber, I want to get back to you since you had made a motion and how you're feeling about the motion now. Egon, go ahead.
Yeah, so, Chief Jones just mentioned, that they've been working with social workers and, also with Butler Behavioral, they've been having discussions, and that is something that I think, it would be very important for us to hear from. I am still, when I look at, the relationship between police work and social work, I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then you have basic security, basic needs. That's your social work, and then you have your, security. That is your, your police your police department. Those are, I'm still, I can't get it through my thick skull to think that, those two are the same. Those are two different things. So, I would like to, if Chief Jones has already been, working with, social workers, I would really love to hear from them to get their take on that, because
Okay.
I have worked in social work, in a data capacity, for a long time. And I just, I want to hear that perspective from, folks that have been in that, that have already dipped their toes into that. So that's just my 2 cents.
Ms. DeLong, you had your hand raised too.
I did. I was just going to ask the question if we did, to your earlier point, not wait for months, but give you a little bit of time. So this working group, I like that. That's pretty cool. The working group would have a focus rather than going down a path and maybe have to backtrack and go down another. To that question of time. But I agree with Pat. I want to hear from Dr. Franklin.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about more time, I mean, do we have to wait for another commission meeting? Can we? No.
I don't think so. I
shouldn't.
think,
I don't
maybe
think so.
even 1 or 2 of us work with Jessica and the city and kind of, get some things written down and then bring it back, and even we could even start it. I think we have been tasked with doing some of this. We don't need any kind of resolution to move forward and do work in between meetings. So I think we can just go on and do the work personally. And maybe if it becomes formalized where we're going to form a working group with some outsiders, some other experts in, we would do that as a group, not just Jessica doing that with 1 or 2 of us.
So
That
we
would
don't
be
need a
my thought.
we don't need a formal motion for that.
I kind of don't think we do. I could be wrong, Doug, but it seems we have some work to do and we can do the work.
Excuse me for stepping out. I had to
That's
go
okay.
home. I think you could go either way. I did not get to hear Amber's motion, but the idea of a motion is to sort of so everyone knows what you're planning to do and the commission votes on it. I don't think it would hurt, but I certainly don't think you have to wait until your next PCRRC meeting to put together a working group. I mean, I think there's flexibility there. So, whichever way you really want to do it, but before Black Lives Matter, I think if anybody followed the PCRRC, we were addressing many of these issues well ahead of many communities. And my son lives in Columbus, and the big city of Columbus, our largest city in Ohio, had to put on a ballot an issue, I think it was issue 3, to form a similar commission. And it passed 75%, I think, in favor of it. But here's our largest city with tremendous resources compared to us, and they finally got around to creating a PCRRC. We've had one for what, 5 years now? And we've been dealing with these issues. So I congratulate you folks for your effort, and Chief Jones. I mean, we've been working on these issues, and we will continue. And as Chief Jones has indicated, you know, he wasn't waiting for a task force or a working group, or, you know, we're addressing these issues because we recognize that it's an issue not only for us, but in other communities as well. So back to your original question, I think you can go either way. I don't see a problem with a working group composed of several of you and inviting some of the others. I mean, typically, if there's an ad hoc committee or something, council usually has to form that. But I think this issue has a lot of community support, and, you know, you've been tasked with this, and so you're going about addressing that task. So hopefully that answers your question in a very long way.
Right. And I think the first step is for a few people to get together and decide what kind of working group do we do? How does it work? Who does it include? How do we gather the information and then keep everyone else informed? But we don't need to, at a public meeting, sit and have that kind of work done. I think we can do that elsewhere. And I think Jessica's thought that she needs some time and to kind of help. And she's been very helpful, I have to say, since she's joined in our meetings. I appreciate her organization. I like that. But I think, you know, Amber, if you wanted to make a motion that we form a working group and, you know, develop membership to it and specific task, et cetera, then we can go about and do it. And part of doing it, I think, Jessica, will be us wrapping our heads around it while we're getting started. You know,
I actually think Amber has a motion on the floor.
Okay. Do you want to repeat your motion, Amber?
Well, so I think I don't know all the specifics of the rules. So I have a motion on the floor. The motion originally was an independent task force. I want to switch it to a working group, if that softens it a little bit.
Yeah.
And not necessarily tie it specifically to that section of the ordinance, but maybe just say that I'd like to make a motion that we form a working group to begin exploring. Oh boy, help me out here. We've had a lot of discussion.
How about
I think you just reference the resolution.
I think you could reference the resolution.
we explore the role that the PCRRC has implementing the resolution? Like, keep it broad so that we can have some
That's
discussion.
very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to say it to me again, Jessica. Explore.
Jessica draft would be to create a working group to explore PCRRC's role in the
Implementation.
outlined in the resolution number 7235.
I'll second the motion as amended.
Okay.
Pat, if there's no further discussion, you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, so we have the motion on the floor to form a working group to explore the implementation of section 1 of this resolution 7235. We have a second. Doug, you want to call the roll and we'll take a vote?
I sure will. Egan Cran,
Yes.
Larry Nadler,
Yes.
Anna Story,
Yes.
Eamon Wang,
Yes.
Amber Franklin,
Yes.
Deirdre DeLong,
Yes.
and Pat Mead.
Yes. Now what I'll do is I'll put out an email tomorrow and see if a couple members of the commission want to be part of that. And then I'll get with Jessica and go forward if that's okay with everyone. Could Jessica be the contact person? Is that good? Does that work? Okay. All right. Then moving on in the agenda, the next thing on the agenda was Mr. Elliott had put out a police survey. I hope everyone got that in an email. Am I correct in that, Doug, that you sent it to all the commission members?
Yes,
All
I
right.
did.
And he's thinking about using this in the city. So I thought, since it has to do with policing and it is kind of a response to the community's interest right now in policing, I'd let Doug just explain to us his plan with this and the purpose, and then hopefully people get a chance to look at it if you wanted to give any feedback. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Doug.
Okay, well, hopefully you had a chance to look at the template. What we're envisioning is this survey done by a company called Polco, P-O-L-C-O. And there was a police survey done, I think, back in 2001. It was done by Miami, Hamilton, or Middletown. A professor there conducted it. So we felt like we needed to do another survey, a more current one, to get broader feedback on our police services here in the city. We met today with, we had a virtual meeting with a couple folks at Polco. It was a kickoff meeting. I didn't get a chance to send out, but they gave us now the customized template. It basically, where it had XX, it now has City of Oxford. But they also gave us some sample questions because we signed up for a half a page of additional questions. So we've already entered into a contract with them. And the benefit of this contract is that not only will we do this police services survey, and we've decided to wait until January because we want to capture the students. And obviously, a lot of students are leaving Thanksgiving weekend and not returning. And so we want to make sure that we include some students. So this will be a random sample survey. And but we also have the ability to post this survey on our website for anyone else who would like to partake in it. But they would separate the responses from those that were random sampled against those that just want to take it. And we would value the input on both of it. So our plan is to give it after the first of the year. If this commission has a suggestion for a question, please send it to me. We want to finalize this. They sent us some sample questions, and I haven't really had a chance to review that. It's been a busy day, but they had some that deal with the police's response and involvement in COVID, and looked pretty good. One other thing I should share with you, though, is that not only are we going to do this survey and get the results from that presented to council and the community, but we will also have the ability to do what they call polls on certain issues. Several communities in Ohio already use their services. I'm becoming more and more familiar with what they have to offer, but I think the polls on various issues could be useful for the city as well, too. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Jessica and JJ also set in on the kickoff meeting today. And like I said, we want to conduct this in January.
Okay.
Mr. Mead, we have some public comment if you.
Okay, if people in the public want to comment on this survey issue, that would be okay. If that's what they have their hand raised for, that's fine. And then we'll let the commission members chime in. So go ahead.
And then Ms. Ray, I want to let you know, I did see your hand, but public discussion on the last item had happened previously to your hand raising. So my apologies. Ms. Rosenberg, go ahead on this topic.
Hi, my name is Shauna Rosenberg, and I'm speaking on behalf of Black Lives Matter Oxford. We were excited to hear that the city intends to conduct a survey of Oxford citizens to assess their feelings toward the Oxford Police Department and policing in Oxford. We believe such a survey has the potential to increase transparency and communication in Oxford, Ohio. We have looked at the contents in the survey and do have some suggestions on how to ensure that the survey presents an accurate and inclusive picture of Oxford. And I want to just say, I'm cutting in, I did make these remarks ahead of time. So I will continue with my suggestions, but I think the poll thing is really cool. I like that you're getting some other questions than what has on the published survey that we saw. So I will continue with my suggestions, but it sounds like some of this is already in play. We think that the diverse stakeholders should have a role in formulating some additional questions that could result in a more holistic picture of Oxford's diverse citizenry and needs. The current survey does offer little opportunity for people to highlight possible discrimination. Even negative ratings on existing questions in the survey do not communicate why those ratings are negative. We hope to see that there are several avenues for engagement with the survey so that there is a complete picture of the experience of the Oxford community. So I'll cut in again and say that random sampling is great, but we do have some suggestions for additional engagement with the survey. We think that there should be a mailer with a link or QR code for the online survey, a hotline number for people who do not have internet access or literacy, and a physical form located strategically at the police department, courthouse, and municipal building. We recognize that there are financial constraints, but failing to provide several means of access will result in an incomplete picture. We would like to see a demographic assessment of participants in relation to the overall population of Oxford so that the context for the results will be more clear. While the survey asks about demographic information, it is important that this information be published along with the survey results, and knowing what percentage of Oxford residents completed the survey and the demographic breakdown of those respondents will help to contextualize any conclusions drawn from the survey. Even if the conclusions of the survey present a generally favorable view of OPD, we cannot allow that fact to cloud the mission of making Oxford a town that champions inclusion, diversity, equity, and transparency. We hope that these suggestions and concerns will be kept in mind during the creation, distribution, and assessment of the policing survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. And Shauna, I'd suggest you email that to Doug in case he forgets some of it. You know, some of the
I have a
suggestions.
photographic memory.
Oh, excellent. Lucky you.
I'm teasing.
All right.
I'm
Is there anybody else, Jessica?
There's no other hands raised. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any comments from anybody on the commission about this? I know when I saw it, Doug, my concern was I looked through it and I thought there's no COVID questions about dealing with COVID, and listening to the city council meeting. And then my daughter told me to peruse through some Facebook feed. I see that policing COVID is an extremely hot topic in Oxford, Ohio, apparently. And I read an article that somebody linked to somebody else. And so I had circled the COVID thing, hoping that you would add something in there, you know, to get people's input on that, because that'll still be around in January and February. Hopefully not as bad, but okay. Anything else from anybody else? Okay. Then the next item on the agenda is if we didn't have enough work to do. Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead, Hannah. Sorry.
I guess I would actually second some of the suggestions that were brought up. My questions lie with the distribution plan. Like, how is this going to be distributed? Where are the reports going to be submitted? And what about the importance of anecdotal experiences? Can we also value feedback of citizens who've been saying, hey, this has been an issue, this has not been addressed, or I don't feel heard? So I wanted to also bring that in and say that this is a good tool, but it also needs other questions that go along with it that kind of get at what we've been trying to say about people wanting to feel heard. And then as a qualitative researcher, I don't believe in such a thing as random sampling. So I just wanted to also second what was brought up about demographic representation of who's being sampled, and making that pretty clear in the reporting. I think those are some of my initial thoughts.
I might add there's a disparity report that we'll get, and we're still learning more about the service that they provide. They've done this in many, many communities, and they're professionals. And of course, you know, as we know, random sample surveys don't answer all the questions, but I think they can get at generally how the public feels. And of course, they have plus or minus as far as responses go. But if you had a chance to read it, there was a question in there that if you had a contact with a police officer, several questions about how you would rate that contact. So, that's what we're trying to get at, but this is only one piece of the puzzle. And, as I said earlier, there'll be a random sample survey of about, I think she said 3,600. And that's a pretty good random sample for a population of 22,000. Then also, we can reach out to various groups, student groups, community groups, and say, look, if you're a resident of Oxford and would like to take this survey, here's how you do it. And we can certainly have paper copies here for them to fill out if they don't have a computer, or we can mail one to them. But of course, we'll see the results for the random sample, and then we'll see the results for folks that didn't get selected but would still like to complete it.
So may I ask, are you able to also link this survey with the PCRRC? So if there was something that they weren't able to share in this particular survey, I know you said at the end it says they have places that they can contact. Could you also link that to us? And then I think my last question would be, what are the implications of this survey, and is City Council willing to work with community groups to address findings of this survey?
Once again, a survey was given a long time ago, and we just want to gauge how the general public feels, and we'll have it broken down by different groups. I've done community surveys in other groups, in other municipalities, but never a specific police services survey. So this is just one tool that the community and our council can use that'll give us some feedback. And, I don't want to jump to conclusions about it. I think, you have a feeling that everybody's going to say everything's great. We'll see. And, I think we can use the polls maybe to ask some questions for anecdotal, if people are willing to do that. And one of the things that we've addressed here is on this commission is, the challenge of dealing with anecdotal information. It's hard for us as the community and the police to follow up on anecdotal stories when we don't know enough details. We still want to hear them, but they are just that, anecdotal. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Egon.
Yeah, I just, I just wanted to echo the concern with, just because you send out a survey to a random sample of the population doesn't mean that, the people that are going to answer it is going to be equally random. Just, because this surveys do take a long time to fill out. And in my experience, with robocalls, for example, the people that are, that answer those are usually the elderly who are sitting at home. But then again, and are just hoping to talk to people. But then again, right now that pretty much represents every one of us. But, again, it's just, I just want to say it's we, seeing that the returning, responses are representative of the population, it's important for us to, really take this, the answers seriously. So,
I mean,
Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think the random sample is a really good idea. Also, the size of the random sample is sufficient, and it will have a good representation of the entire community. And what I'm thinking about in terms of the survey, I think I have a few more suggestions. And when we talk about, we need to reach out to different groups, for example, student groups or some other groups. excuse me, on the survey, we need to have a question that show which group they're from. And that way, even we're not actively reaching those groups, we will have information on how many people in those groups are actually participated. And also, when the random selection is conducted, and that random process will have a list of the names that are selected, and that they can be categorized into different groups. And when the data are collected, and when you calculate the proportion, and like for example, which group, what's the percentage of each group responded, and that will also provide a good picture on the representativeness that are addressed by a few commission members. So and also I think what Doug's plan with a random sample, also the focus groups is or like also for like the individuals that are maybe willingly to do the survey, or they are interested in doing the survey. And that way, if you just do a not random, just whoever wants to conduct the survey, some group of the people may be overly represented, other group will be less represented. Therefore, have a random sample is really good, and also give the opportunity to people who are interested in making more contributions. And that is an excellent idea as well. So one suggestion I just mentioned is that, and we need to think about which group of people we need to reach out, or which group of people that we are interested in hearing from them, and make sure that those information are in the survey. So we know who responded to those surveys and in whatever ways. And then when we do the calculation, the summary, we will understand the different perspectives of the people from different groups. And also, if those demographic information are added in the survey, we can also see how that group is responded in that random sample. I also have another question on the survey itself. The survey, and typically, if when you do a survey, it doesn't matter whether you do it on Quadtracs or SurveyMonkey or whatever. The one allow multiple selections are typically designed in a way that is different from you only select one. And so I don't know whether how this survey is designed, but it seems like some questions that allow multiple answers are designed similar to the one only allow one answer. And if that's the, that I can be just completely wrong, because they may just make it look the same, but have different functions. But that is something probably, something we want to try out first, have people try it out before actually implement the survey itself. So those are some of my thoughts and my suggestions.
Yeah, well, thank you all for your comments, and we'll look to address many of those. As I said, this is a company that basically they joined it with the National Research Center that I believe has been doing surveys for communities for 30 or 40 years. And they've combined their resources. So they're the experts. I can't speak, but a lot of the things that you brought up, for example, there'll be a differentiation between the students and the long-term residents. It'll be interesting to see the differences there. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I just one last thing from my end. If it's possible for, this survey company Polko to provide the city with the actual raw data of the results. It is a possibility to rebalance or to weigh the data in a way to make it representative if it's not. So that is definitely a possibility. So if they're willing to provide the raw data and the returns. So, just, make sure that, that they are willing to provide that and not just a nice, package report.
They're going to make a presentation. We did sign up for the
Yeah.
formal presentation, and that'll most likely be made to city council, and we'll certainly notify all you members and the whole community that this presentation is taking place. So, once again, this is not any magic bullet. This is just give us some feedback from the community that I think would be useful.
Yeah, Doug, can I ask a question? A lot of concern, as people have spoken, has had to do with the representativeness of the data. So obviously the sampling is random and it's a sizable sample they're seeking, but the sample they end up with, which can be dealt with later, as Egon just said, but did they give any indication, since you say you haven't personally had experience with a survey of this nature, what their experience is in terms of response rate? Because obviously the higher the response rate, the more concerns about is the sample representative are better addressed, as opposed to a very small response rate. Did they talk about that at all, or what strategies they have to try to build as large a sample as possible?
Yeah, we touched on that today. And, obviously as professional pollsters, they're aware of how to address those issues. And, I guess I should probably have invited them to join us, and I didn't realize we were going to get these very technical questions because, I remember taking a political science course in polling and learning a lot, but it's been a long time since I've read Bill Key's book on it. So, but yeah, I trust them. I'm familiar with this company. I used them when I was in Hudson when they were National Research Center, and they did a fine job. And I've listened to several of their presentations at ICMA, but I've never wanted to spend the money. It's not all that expensive, but I brought it up with the past council, the community survey, and a couple of them said, no, we don't need to do that. We already know what the citizens want and how they feel. So, but I thought, given the nature of some of the issues now with police, that it would be very useful for us to get an updated survey.
Right. But did they say anything about what response rate to expect at all?
I don't have my notes here in front of me, but obviously they expect low response rate from students. And like someone else mentioned, they get a higher response rate from people who are sitting home all day and they're retired and they're very involved in the community. So they'll make, they'll account for that. And we're going to make efforts to get the students to respond. That's the main reason why we're holding off on it until mid-January, is because if they're not here, you can't really expect them to respond.
I also want to ask a follow-up question. That you signed the contract already, probably wouldn't be able to make any changes. And I'm a second with Egan's question in terms of whether they're going to provide you with raw data. If they are providing the raw data, then there's lots of things that we can do. We can further explore. But if they're not provide raw data, they're only going to give a presentation, then will they give you the presentation on the if you have any special requests on certain reports, certain analysis, and will they do that, or they just do it on their own?
We'll ask them for raw data. I don't think that, we're a college town, and I think we'll just say, hey guys, we got a lot of curious people who want raw data and they know how to work it, and they'll probably get all geeky and be like, let's share. So we'll ask them and see if we can get that to you. And then I was on that presentation too. It's a random sample, and then we'll do a lot of outreach to get more feedback, and your feedback on giving different ways to get responses is good, and we'll circle back with you guys.
But I do believe they'll be
Yeah, that'd be
protective.
excellent.
I do believe they'll be protective of name and addresses.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's no name on the survey at all. No name, no address on the survey. Yeah.
Well, they're going to pull up mailing addresses to pull the
Okay.
random sample survey. So, because I asked the question about, because I was trying to think about if students are gone, can we get the list of mailing addresses so we could post them and say, hey, you need to respond. They said basically that I forget her exact words. They wouldn't be providing that. So, but I'm sure we can get the actual responses for each survey. A lot of data. I mean, you're going to be looking at 3,600, or I think it's 3,500. I looked at my notes, and of course there's several questions, and then within those questions there are several responses. So it's like more than just the number of questions there. Within a question, there's more questions. So
if they don't get 3,500 the first round, will they go through several rounds of distribution to get that number of responses?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that, but they're going to be sending postcards out, and then follow-up postcards, and we're going to be out in the media making sure people respond that get it, and then also informing the rest of the public, hey, if you'd like to fill it out, here's how you do it. I mean, we had a real challenge with the census, with students, and the fact that they had to basically take recess from conducting the census, and then when they started back up, our students were gone, and so it was a real challenge. So
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone.
yes, thank you.
I think the next item on the agenda could go quickly depending on how deeply people read the ordinance. I asked people to read over the ordinance that created this commission and created the process to review complaints at the city to the OPD and kind of get your feedback. I think, Doug and I were around when it was written. I think we probably wrote parts of it and then had much back and forth about everything that should be included. And I think I was so close to the document, having taken part in the writing of the document, I thought, after this summer, I thought, what if something happened in Oxford and somebody appealed a complaint that went through Chief Jones, and Lieutenant Robinson did his due diligence and investigated. They gave a finding back to the person wasn't satisfied, and they appealed to us. Or if something even worse happened, where we automatically become involved. If you read the ordinance, did you feel like it is something that we're going to be able to work with if we ever have to work with it? I was looking for input from the other 6 members of the commission as they kind of delved into it, because I don't know how many of you read the whole ordinance before you signed up and volunteered to be part of this. Some of you might have and some might not. So I was really looking just for your feedback. I'm hoping Deirdre can chime in, having been a police officer. She may have been able to read this and bring some expertise to this as well. But if you all think everything's good, then we can go on. And I don't know if anybody in the public would have downloaded it and read it when they saw it on the agenda. But if someone wants to take part in public participation before we discuss it, you can raise your hand if you're familiar with the ordinance itself.
Pat, I read the ordinance a few times, and I also read it before the meeting. I did not read word by word, but basically my understanding of the commission is an advisory commission. It's not a decision body. It's not So if that will be the nature of is how this commission is designed, I'm fine with it. But if we're thinking about that, we're taking other responsibilities rather than just an advisory body.
You mute it.
Sorry, I muted too quick. I said if we're considering that the commission may take additional roles or responsibilities more than just an advisory body, then there could be more to discuss. But as an advisory body, I think we're doing very much with what this commission is designed to do.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It set us up to give advice to the OPD and the city. They can take that advice or not take that advice, basically.
But I think, Pat, if I might, though, I think that advisory role is very important, but there's also that very important role of the complaint process.
Yes.
So, so it's sort of a dual role.
So I don't know if anybody else read through it, and especially the second part, the complaint process. I guess I don't want to be caught if something happens that we realize we're not up to the task. I think when George Floyd was murdered, it was very good in the city of Oxford that this commission existed to help channel some thoughts about policing. And we were ahead of the game, as Doug said, ahead of the largest city in Ohio. And I want to make sure if something happens, we're also prepared to help the community and the police department. And we aren't realizing, wow, this thing is not written in a way that provides us with the tools we need to help out in this situation with, something happen. So if someone wants to comment, I see Amber's unmuted.
Yeah, I've been reading quite a bit about different kinds of models of police oversight. And if anyone's interested, I can share with you some documents. There's a whole thesis written about it. And I think we have to balance kind of what some models are able to do with what reasonably we can do here, right? So right now, the way the ordinance is written, from what I've read and studied, it looks like we fit with the review and appellate model. And so other cities that have a review and appellate model kind of operate the way ours does. Like, we don't do the investigation, the police officers do. It's internal investigation, and we get the results, and we're privy to some kinds of data or information related to the investigation, and Chief Jones has shared a lot of that information with us. And then we either say that we agree or disagree with the final outcome. The other type of model is what's called an investigative and quality assurance model, and I think that fits a little bit more with what's going on in Cincinnati. After the riots, there was a consent decree with the Department of Justice. And so they have this huge oversight model, but they have a budget for that. They have like staff that are paid prosecutor, like, these are things that I don't think we can do here. And so I think for a city of our size, what we have written in the ordinance is actually pretty good. And frankly, I had looked at it early on when I joined the commission 5 years ago, and hadn't looked at it very closely again until this summer. And it actually was a little stronger than I thought it was. There are some larger cities that have less latitude than we do, even in the way the ordinance was written. So I'm okay with it as written right now.
Okay. Yeah, we are basically, we handle if someone appeals, if they file a complaint and then appeal that they didn't think the police department heard them right. And we're also supposed to review the investigation of any case that involves serious injury or death, even if it isn't appealed. That's in the thing. But the investigation, you're right, that's Lieutenant Robinson and the police department, because we're a small city and we aren't going to have a department that does that work.
And we don't have the expertise either to do like
we don't have the expertise.
investigations.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. We would not. And I'm sure in cities like Cincinnati, the oversight group hires their own investigators who has expertise. But did other people get a chance to read it and feel comfortable that we are in a good position to help the city and the police department in the situation if someone appeals and or something serious happens and we need to review it, as far as, you know, calling witnesses and gathering information and having the police department turn things over and in a sense be that appellate for the person? Okay, good. I just, go ahead, Hannah.
No. My questions are, do we need to have it anywhere in here about like procedure? So as of right now, I don't think we're of the same understanding of how a complaint gets to us. And then what do we actually do? I think, is it some of the language says if someone, let's see, under complaint procedure, letter F. So if I'm understanding this correctly, if someone involved in a complaint investigation requests a meeting with us, we have to schedule that within 30 days. What about if we do receive a complaint through the web links that are being created right now? And then what do we actually do? Are we just using PCRC meetings to discuss them? Do we have an understanding of like that meeting is just going to be reviewing a complaint and making a recommendation there? Or is this like, are there more steps there?
Okay,
And
I'm
then,
going to try to answer them because I'm going to forget your first question by the time you get to the last one. I don't know if Chief Jones or Doug is better at holding things in their head, but I'm not writing them down. I can answer some of your questions. One is if we get a complaint through our website, our job is to forward it to the police chief. And they do the investigation. We do no investigation. And that's in part B of that part. Part F, if after they go through their whole investigation, I know Chief Jones, because he's shown us some of these, gets back to them and writes a letter. And at the end of the letter, he says, if you want to appeal, you can appeal to the PCRRC. The person's supposed to let the city know that. And then the city will let us know. And then we would schedule then to hear their complaint, get all the information from the police department. And basically, as a review, as an appellate, we could say to Chief Jones and the police, you know, we disagree. We think there should have been discipline of this officer. They still can do what they want with it. We're only advisory. We have no power to say they discipline an officer. We might agree and say, no, the police department did everything appropriately. They dealt with the situation. But that to me is how I read it as our role. Is that we basically sort of rehear their investigation and rehear from the person complaining and review the case and say, here's what we agree with and disagree with. I mean, I don't know if there was anything else read in there, and we're allowed to receive all the information about the investigation that they can give us by law. I think there's a caveat in there that some things that they might not legally be able to pass on to us. And Chief Jones may be able to speak to that. I don't think the city lawyer is here, but we can, according to this, you know, afterwards, if someone complains, ask for the information of the investigation, call people in to ask them questions, and it would be a meeting. It would have to, I think it would have to be an open meeting.
Yes, it would.
Have to be an open meeting. It's not a closed meeting. We don't get executive sessions.
Well, we don't either for that type of thing.
Yeah, right. Okay. So if everybody has an understanding of it and we're good and we think this is good, and I remember, Doug, when we wrote it way back when, there was, you know, we did a lot of back and forth about how the review would work. And rightfully so, there's a lot of input from the police department unions, you know, because 5 years ago, a group of people were saying, we want to review what you're doing. And they rightfully, as workers who know their job way better than we do, had concerns about that because they have their own disciplinary process, et cetera. And we kind of have to keep we all have to keep the union contract in mind.
Yeah. Pat, if I might, I think you summarized it very well, but I want to go back to the history. I spent a lot of time researching other communities, large and small, that had an oversight committee. The list has gotten a little bigger, but not that much in Ohio. I still get calls from time to time from communities in Ohio about our PCRRC and asking to see our ordinance and asking how it's going and so on and so forth. So I think, you folks should pat yourselves on the back. We've done a good job. And Pat and I did spend a lot of time going back and forth and crafting what we thought would work in our community. And Amber, I really appreciate your comments. We do legislation on paper, and if we find that we have a problem, we can always make a recommendation to City Council and address it. Right now, I think we have the workings of a pretty good PCRRC.
Thank you.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
We didn't call for public comment at the beginning of the discussion, and there is
I did not. I apologize. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. We will have public comment if they want to comment on the ordinance, or if they happen to download or look at the pamphlet, Know Your Rights. We'll take comment on that before we move on to that part of the agenda about the what to do when you're stopped by the police pamphlet. So if anybody in the community wants to comment on the ordinance itself or the pamphlet that we'll be discussing in a couple minutes.
Are you ready for that now then?
Yes.
There is.
Thank you, Jessica.
Ms. Shaman, go ahead.
Thank you. Amy Shaman, 11 Heather Ridge Court. I have a question on some of the wording in the ordinance. It is part 141, the complaint procedure, item H, as in hotel. That is the text. There's 2 paragraphs from what I see in the document about retaliation. So I appreciate that that's there. My question is, there's a protection listed about retaliation. Who enforces that, and how is any citizen fear or hesitation due to fear of retaliation accounted for in this whole process? How can the public be reassured that that they're protected? I don't see anything here that says how the retaliation protection works beyond a statement that it shouldn't happen. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I think I'll let Chief Jones or Doug field that question.
If my memory serves me right, that was added to the proposal that I brought forth, and it was added towards the end of the process. So here's how I would interpret it. First off, I think, we need to talk about what do we mean by retaliation, and it's really not defined. But if, let's say, someone feels that an officer retaliated against them because of a complaint, I would deal with it as a city manager. Obviously, a citizen could talk to a lawyer if they weren't satisfied with how the cities handle it. I don't expect that ever to happen. But once again, it was sort of brought in at the last minute, as I recollect, and I don't know if you agree with me there, Pat. We did have some discussion, I believe, on the PCRRC as well as City Council, but it's a good question, and I
think your memory serves you right about when it was added. It was added near the end of the discussion as we talked about why people are reluctant to complain about police officer work. And to be honest, working in a school system, you get some parents who say, my kid's afraid to complain because a teacher will, quote, retaliate against them. In retaliation, then, when you complain about a professional that you're kind of dependent on one way or another, or who has authority over you, can be many things. I'm going to let Chief Jones talk, because my assumption is in the OPD's structure that there would be disciplinary action taken against an officer who retaliated, whether this was in the ordinance or not. It would be my guess.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was wanting to add. We would deal with that. Obviously, you know, we're a small department. We don't get many complaints. So if before the person, before anything would happen, I think we would catch something going on like that. I think, to Ms. Shaman's point about how do we reassure them, I think that's done through our process, and that's just simply, you know, when they meet with us, they file the complaint. You know, it goes to me, that we assign an investigator. I send them a letter. I assure them that it'll be looked at thoroughly, that we will need to contact them for additional information. I assign it to a lieutenant, that's typically Lieutenant Robinson, who then meets with the person. We try to reassure them. So, you know, and we ask the right questions. I think if you could see, I think many of the PCRC members have seen, is our investigations are done very professionally. They're very thorough. We have to balance due process for the officer as well in that, and we meet with the folks in the public and assure them that that's not going to happen, and it's never happened in my time here. So beyond the police chief role.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Amy. I do think it's, you know, in my opinion, a matter of culture. And I hope that I believe the culture that Mr. Elliott and Chief Jones create within the department would have a culture where that would not be tolerated and dealt with. Okay, if nobody else in the public wants to comment on that and or the what to do when you're stopped by the police pamphlet, we're going to move on to that. And we're closing on 2 hours, and I really hate to keep a volunteer commission longer than that. So I kind of want to hopefully move on this.
Actually, I was
yes, go ahead.
in the interest of time and energy, because I can see we're all sort of waning. I don't know that this was as much of a priority as some of the topics that we've discussed so far. If you would be willing to entertain a motion that we table this till our next meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to table it. And do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay, and it was Hannah's kind of taking the lead on this, so thank you, Hannah. All right, Doug, I guess, should we call the roll on that motion and to table this?
Yes.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Egan Cran? Egan? Are you muted?
Sorry, I said sure, yes, yes.
Larry Nadler?
Yes.
Hannah Story?
Yes.
Eamon Wang?
Yes.
Amber Franklin?
Yes.
Deirdre DeLong?
Yes.
And Pat Mead?
Yes. Okay, then the business items at the end. I'd ask for comments from commission members, but you know, we all comment on a lot unless someone's got something burning they want to say. Okay, I really want to thank you all for your work. You're a very impressive group. It's kind of really easy to work with this group. Our next meeting, we could meet in January. I don't want to meet in December. I think in January, the third Thursday, because by then maybe we have something back with Jessica on this work group and get it rolling instead of dragging it on longer. And some of the work might be done by then. So I'd like to meet January 21st. It's the third Thursday, which is what we've been doing at 7 o'clock. I'll put that out in an email. And then if I get too many no's, we'll rearrange it. And with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion made.
Thank you, Deirdre. Second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Amin. If you want to call the roll, Doug, so we can all take off.
Here we go. Egan Cran?
I could talk to you guys all night, but yeah, I'm good with that.
Larry Nadler,
Yes.
Anna Story,
Yes.
Eamon Wang,
Yes.
Amber Franklin,
Yes.
Gabriel Long,
Yes.
and Pat Mead.
Yes.
Good night, all of you.